Hey everybody, this is Sean from The Caption Life, and today we have a very exciting episode to give you. Recently, Dark Horse Comics just released a trade paperback for We Only Kill Each Other, which was created by Stephanie Phillips, Peter Krause, Ellie Wright, and Troy Peteri, and we were able to get the artist Peter Krause onto this show to tell us a little bit more about this comic. So let's check it out.
Welcome to another episode of The Caption Life, a podcast about how comics and pop culture impact life and society and vice versa. Coming to you from deep in the heart of Texas, I'm Kevin.
And from Indiana, I am Sean. Before we get started with this episode, please hit that subscribe button on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, and follow us on social media under the username @CaptionLife. And you can also find out more information about us and past episodes at thecaptionlife.com.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode. You know, we're going to always bring you the best comics talk out there. Here in The Caption Life, we are lovers of all types of comics. But if you listen to previous episodes, you know that I especially am a lover of a good crime thriller. And we recently got to read a really good one. And tonight we have the privilege of talking to the artist who did the work on it. So Peter Krause is a graduate of the University of Minnesota with a BA in both journalism and studio arts. He has previously worked full-time as an artist for DC Comics, where he drew Captain Marvel, Superman, and other DC superheroes as well as the series Star Trek: The Next Generation. He also co-created the comic Irredeemable with Mark Waid at Boom Studios, as well as the art on My Bad and Dragonfly Man at Ahoy Comics. He's worked extensively as a storyboard artist and concept artist. And joining us from Minnesota tonight joining us from Minneapolis to talk about his smash hit We Only Kill Each Other for Dark Horse and Comixology is Peter Krause. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you. We were looking I need to do that again. We've been looking forward to having you on the show, so it's really excited to have you on here, especially with the release of We Only Kill Each Other that just came out, and Kevin and I had a chance to read the collection, and it's really cool. So we're really excited to talk to you about that. Whenever we have guests on the show, we always ask them. We always start off with the same question with every guest, and that is, what is your comic book origin story? Was there someone or something that introduced you to comics, and what was it that made you a comic book fan?
I probably at one point when I was quite young, I probably did come across a comic. I did draw a lot when I was young, but our family moved from one of the suburbs in Minneapolis when I was in third grade, and we moved back into Minneapolis proper. And I ended up hooking up with two other guys, Jim Collier and Tim Osterland, and we both like to draw. All of us like to draw, and they were super into comics. And this is, I'm of a generation where also that the place that we moved into right around the corner from our block was a drugstore, and they had a spinner rack, and the guys that worked at the drugstore were huge comic book fans. So I had this great little group of people that were super into comics, and Tim and Jim and I would go to each other's house and draw and trade comic books back and forth. And that was such a nurturing, exciting time to, get introduced to comics. That's really the origin story right there.
Nice.
And how about how that led into the career that you've had?
Well, now that's a long story. For one reason or another, I grew up during the 60s and the 70s. So, I didn't know if I could really make a living drawing. And so when I did go to college, I always liked to write as well. So I initially just was going to focus on being a journalism major. and did pick up art classes along the way. But I really have to hand it to Lisa, my wife. When I got out of college, I had a job that had nothing to do with art. I wasn't picking up a pen or pencil or a paper for years. When Lisa and I got married, she was pretty well established in her career. I said, there's something I've always wanted to try. And she said, yeah, well, go for it. I mean, and it was a different generation then. College was relatively inexpensive. You could work a job during the summer and pay for college. We had no college debt. We had no kids. We had no mortgage. She was established in her career. So, I'd do odd jobs to pick up a few bucks here and there. And, really, I didn't start doing this and making any kind of a real living doing this work until I was in my early 30s. So, so there's, I give all credit to Lisa. She's been very, very supportive.
Awesome. And I kind of touched on some of the highlights of your comic art career. But can you maybe just give us a rundown of some of the things you've worked on and maybe what's one of your most favorite things that you've worked on?
Oh boy. I did some black and white stuff during the 80s. Worked for slave labor graphics briefly. The first regular gig that I really had was Star Trek: The Next Generation for DC, and I got that after they had these things called bonus books at the time for new people that wanted to break into the business. They'd give them a little tryout, which actually get published in a book. So I had a story that was published in an old copy of Suicide Squad. And we also had people here in town in Minneapolis. Dan Jurgens. I got to know Dan before I got into the business. He gave me a lot of tips. And pushed my name once he figured that I was ready for it. So Star Trek: The Next Generation, then obviously Power Shazam was definitely a highlight there. Working at DC, some Superman fill-ins, Birds of Prey. Then I've had a weird career. I left comics for about 8 years. Worked more in advertising, and it wasn't until really Irredeemable. I did a small story for an Image Pop Gun anthology that Derek McCulloch wrote, and as a result of that, got back into comics. Worked on Irredeemable for Boom, and since then have done Daredevil stories for Marvel, and have just kind of perked along here. Ahoy has been a great place to work, and done a Kickstarter with Chip Mosher, Blacking Out, another crime story. So those are some of the things. My Bad for Ahoy is out now. Trade comes out next month, and I'm working on the second season of that right now. So there will be another 5-issue miniseries of that. Awesome. I'm very fortunate that I've been able to keep busy doing it.
Yeah, you seem to be doing a lot of work, staying busy here. I guess I wouldn't say later in life, but further into your career.
You can say later in life. I think this is the interesting thing about comics right now. I definitely saw the guys that were in the generation before me that I really idolized. The Jack Kirbys, the Kurt Swans. I was somewhat familiar with Kurt's story. I got to meet him a few times, and they went through this kind of fallow period about the time, in their 50s and 60s, now there's so many more avenues to, do comics. There's so many more publishers. There's Webtoons. There's just there's the bookstore market, Scholastic and Viz and all that stuff. So, again, I feel fortunate that it's worked that way. I'm it was one of the things that I was always nervous about doing comics, but it's very fortunate that it's worked out fairly well for me.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why we brought you on tonight is because we want to talk to you about one of your latest comic series, We Only Kill Each Other, from Dark Horse Comics. And it was written by Stephanie Phillips, and you were the artist on it. It was colored by Ellie Wright and letters by Troy Peteri. Can you give us a little bit of a synopsis of that story and how you and Stephanie came up with the idea for it?
Sure. So the synopsis of the story is it's 1938.
Mm-hmm.
There is, looking back now, we know Nazis are bad. During that era, that was kind of an unknown quantity, and there were people in the United States that were trying to get a American Nazi party going.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the Jewish gangsters who are brought together under, I don't know, coercion, threat by the DA, knowing that these Nazis, and they perceived them as a threat, so said, maybe we can use each other here. And Jonas and Levi Solomon are thrown together. They don't really like each other, but they're put in this situation where either they're going to go to jail or they're going to help the authorities make life miserable for the American Nazi Party in New York City. And that's where, Steph was, really had the story fully fleshed out. She is Jewish, and she really is likes that era. And as she's explained in some of her interviews, in going into the Jewish past is something that she is very energetic about. So and I thought it was, when I was presented with this, she had seen some work that I was doing for a prospective series with Ron Mars, and I think that kind of sold her on me drawing it. So that's when she approached me in the summer of 2020 about drawing the book, and I was all for it. Steph is a wonderful collaborator and a great writer, and incredibly enthusiastic. If you're a comic book artist, that's what you want in a collaborator. It was a dream project, definitely.
Now you said Stephanie wrote the story, so I apologize. I think I read somewhere, I thought that both of you came up with it, but it sounds like maybe Stephanie is the one that came up with it, and she brought you on board. Okay, so I apologize for that. I read somewhere that you two were like the co-creators, so that's why I assumed. So I apologize.
Well, artists are co-creators right along with the writers, and it's something where she would have. Steph is pretty visual in her writing. Right. But there were times where I'd go, hey, what if we try it this way, and that sort of thing. And she was always very, very supportive of, leaving the final call on the visuals to me. But I would always, I want to run it by my writer, or I should say not my writer, but the writer I'm working with on the project. So, right. So yes, artists are co-creators in comics,
right? and that makes sense. I guess when I read it in that context, whatever, I thought they were talking about like who came up with the story necessarily. But yeah, definitely, it's the co-creation. That makes a lot more sense with the way you framed it now. So I apologize for that. So
no problem.
Yeah, and we are champions of the artist receiving credit for their work here. Because we know, like, if you spend any time on Twitter, especially, and you get to follow some comic artists, you know that a lot of times when there's a story in news media that talks about a series or whatever, they oftentimes mention the writer, but a lot of times they fail to mention the artist, who, because of the medium, are they're equally important.
Well, right. Yeah, I mean, I know the analogy has been made before, but. And it doesn't, completely work, because comics are a different medium than film, but there are similarities between a director for a movie and the comic book artist doing a comic book. One artist put it this way: is the writer tells me, the artist, the story, and then I tell the story to the reader. Now, I don't want to completely cut the writer off from all of this, because there's dialogue and all that sort of thing too. But it's an educational thought to have about how comics are made.
No, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, that's very good.
So you mentioned filmmaking, and the setting of this comic being the late 30s. There's a very cinematic appeal for what you've drawn, because of, I guess maybe it's the way we understand like gangsters in that period of time. What was your favorite part of creating a period piece like this for the page, when it came to, maybe the setting and the maybe the cars or whatever? What was your favorite part of this piece of work?
Well, the research before you even draw is always interesting to kind of go through. And now we have the internet, which is a big help. Obviously, when I started, that wasn't the case. You'd have swipe files, and you'd have to rely on those kind of things. I still like to get a couple of books to kind of flesh things out. The fashion is always very interesting to me. What people wear is always fun to draw, I think. I think about this era, and then maybe like, the 1970s. That kind of clothing is, I find, very enjoyable to draw. And then the settings and the cars. I know there's the kind of a common idea that comic book artists don't like to draw automobiles, but those cars are a lot of fun to draw. And there is a guy on one of the YouTube channels that just interviews people that have restored old automobiles, and that was great, because he would spend 20 minutes talking to the person. They would pan all over the automobiles and that sort of thing, and so that was wonderful for.
Is that where you got a lot of your reference from?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's how we got the car, and the model was kind of escaping my mind right now, but with the suicide doors that open.
That's one of my favorite images from the story. When he's hanging out the suicide door, shooting the gun at the people that are chasing him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was so. When you're an artist and you're trying to figure out the problems of the storytelling, and you come across something like that, and that light bulb just kind of goes off. That's like gold. It just says, "Oh, this is going to work so well with what Steph has here." So, yeah, those type of things. I do really like to do stuff like this, especially from kind of that era. And I had done the Archie 1941 series not too long before this, so I was somewhat familiar with the era even before I started on We Only Kill Each Other.
Nice. So in reading the comic, there seems to be a lot of parallels that resonate with what we're seeing in the world today. So, for example, we'll talk about the rise of American Nazism in 1938, and it seems like that has also kind of made its resurgence lately, and a lot of other things that kind of ties into what it means to be a patriot with like multiple identities and things like that. And so we were kind of curious if there was like some sort of social commentary that you and Stephanie were hoping to achieve with this story as you were writing, if it was supposed to be a commentary on what we're seeing today, or if it's just like completely coincidental, or if you were hoping to, kind of interweave some of the things that we're seeing today and using the story as a way to kind of talk about, how things looked, back then and what we're seeing now.
Well, I mean, first thing you want to do with a comic book is tell a good story. You certainly don't want to be a polemic where you're just pounding people over the head, but the parallels you just can't ignore. What was going on then and going on now. And I think I was thinking about this today, that the struggle or the fight for fairness, for empathy, for opportunity, that those struggles are never over. We're gonna you constantly have to, good people have to come to the fore and do good things and great things and courageous things. I would love to say that World War II and how that ended, and that was the end of Nazism. And I think for a long time, for a generation, we thought that was the case.
Right.
And it's disheartening to see that is not. But I think what it just means that those of us who, I guess for lack of want to fight the good fight, want to make the world a better place, have to continue to do the best that we can to make sure that continues on. So if anything, that's maybe that's the larger theme or idea that will come out of it.
Yeah. Is there anything that you gave special consideration to when doing the art for the book in terms of the subject matter? I mean, because there's some imagery in the book that that harkens back to the war, and it also mentions the atrocities that were carried out by the Germans during the Holocaust and whatnot. But is there any certain approach that you use to paint this picture, given the subject matter?
Yeah, well, at the time when this starts in 1938, how far along those atrocities, and obviously they weren't known in the U.S., so that isn't really a topic of the story that we're drawing or writing here. Obviously, we know that in hindsight,
right?
I think that you, just as far as tone of a comic, I think if you look at my other stuff as well, I'm not a big fan of me drawing every bad thing that happens to the characters in there. There's several instances of violence in We Only Kill Each Other, and a number of them you're either obscured from seeing or it happens off panel.
Right.
I think that's very effective storytelling. Let the reader think about just how bad this could be, and somehow that ends up being even more powerful, maybe even scarier than if I were to delineate every blood splat or broken bone. I think that works pretty well for storytelling, and it's something that Steph would do in the scripts as well. So so if you're talking about a way or that I would handle that kind of thing, that's
No, I think that's an interesting way to approach it. There's a scene where I think where Solomon is closing the doors and something is happening something is happening to a character behind the doors. It is a way to I guess illustrate the seriousness of the violence without having to show it. And I think it's done a couple of times to like maximum effectiveness within the story.
Well, thank you. In fact, I was looking at that sequence today, and Steph originally had it with the guy who ends up being the butt of the violence, so to speak, trying to indicate via gesture or whatever. And I thought that might be tough with his hands tied behind his back. So we pulled back to see the Shabbat meal. And, the victim is saying, but, this is the Sabbath. You can't be doing this. And so he obviously, spoiler alert, so he turns the gun over to one of his hired goons. And then I like that, like you said, that last scene on that page of him closing the doors. It's like him, it's like him wiping his hands of his any guilt or any blame.
Right.
I think that worked pretty well.
Yeah. Right. Oh yeah. Well, and especially, I think that there's a lot of great heritage moments that come into play from Judaism as well too, because just like what you said, like, Levi is probably more of the traditional Jewish person, where he's probably looking at it from a little bit more of rigid laws and stuff like that. So just like what you said with that symbolism of the door shutting, of him wiping his hands clean of it and everything like that, I think does a great job of kind of adding on layers to what that image means as well too. So I love that idea. So
well, thanks. And Steph was great with giving me as much of the Jewish traditions and how they would be presented visually as I wanted. So
that's awesome.
I actually think it's a really interesting commentary on like how we treat religion and how we embrace the parts of religion that like suit us. But like in Solomon's case, like he doesn't have any qualms about like, killing somebody or having somebody killed. I mean, he doesn't want to pull the trigger on the Sabbath, but the dude ends up dead either way. And it's just one of those things that like, a lot of times we cherry pick what we want to what we want to follow in our religion because it suits us.
Right. And that's an interesting, if you were using that reasoning, you might say that Jonas is the more honest person because he just doesn't want anything to do with his heritage.
Yeah, right.
Although he comes around like, a little bit more.
Yeah, he's like, I'm Jewish in name only. Like his attitude towards it, he's not embracing it at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it has, those different kinds of layers because Judaism is definitely the religion part. Then there's the racial aspect as well too. So I think that's the part with him. Like he doesn't embrace the Judaism of the religion, but he still identifies as a Jew in terms of belonging to a group of people. It's really fascinating. I mean, it really is. So,
that opening sequence pretty much shows that. So
right, yeah. Peter, there is something in the book that I absolutely loved, and I gotta say I didn't really make this connection until I did something, and I'll say that. And it seems like in the first page of every issue, there's like a lettering, splash panel or splash page that says, "Wook" on it, and it looks like it's almost like in a exclamation point because it has like a little O at the bottom, like the dot. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then it didn't hit me until I think I was texting somebody or posting something in Discord where I decided to abbreviate "We Only Kill Each Other."
I sent you a text yesterday about it.
It was before that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was before that. Yeah, it was like probably like 4 or 5 days ago. But yeah, it was before that. But then as I was typing it out, I saw and put it in initial form. I saw that it said WOKE. I was like, oh, that's what that is. I was like, that makes a lot of sense now. So I don't know if that was like intentional or if that was something that is just, again, kind of coincidence or not.
Boy, I think that might be coincidence.
I just looked way too much into that, didn't I?
Okay, now I'm really curious. I'm gonna have to go look through things and see that. So
Yeah. It's like the first, it's like that first, splash page where it says it has the initial WOKE, but then at the bottom, it didn't quite look like an O.
It's the second O.
Yeah.
And we only kill each other, but it looks like it says woke with a period at the end.
Right. It kind of, and because it's the letters are going up and down, it almost forms like a exclamation point.
Yeah.
So that's on the first issue? The first
it's either first or second.
I think it's like the last page in all of them.
Okay.
It's the last page. It's either last page.
It's like a logo.
Page. Yeah. It looks like a logo in that. Yeah.
All right. So. Now I'm going to have to look through that and see that. So.
I will admit that I thought it said woke like an exclamation point at first as well, but then I realized it was WEK or WOKEO.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't make that connection until I actually was texting the abbreviation for it. I was like, "Oh, that's probably what it is." So,
hey, Peter, when you were preparing for to do the art on this story, did you watch any old gangster movies to help you prepare?
No, I didn't. I really didn't watch anything that I can remember right offhand. There might have been some series or something, but I can't recall actually watching anything in particular. Most of the stuff that when I do research on these things, I either look at printed material, or in this case, I did watch a number of, like newsreels from the era, because I'm at that point I was more interested in trying to get again the environment and all that sort of thing down. Steph gave me a great template with the story. I didn't feel like I really needed to go into any other movies and that sort of stuff to get the feeling and everything. I was again a lot of old newsreels which are available on YouTube.
Okay.
Those are a big help.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason why I ask is if you would have watched some old gangster movies, it would have helped you prepare for the game that we're about to play.
Oh, the game,
which is called "We Only Shoot the Pictures." I was inspired by your story. We only kill each other. To create a little game where I'm gonna quiz you and Sean. Pitch you against each other. I'm gonna quiz you and Sean about old gangster movies from the 1930s. So I'm gonna show you my screen. Which if you're listening to this, go and check out the YouTube video so that you can see the questions. But I'm going to show you my screen, and Peter, I'm going to let you go first. It's going to be a multiple choice question. I'm just going to describe a movie, show you the poster, and ask you to guess the name.
Okay, I'll do my best.
So here we go. This is our game of the week. We only shoot the pictures.
I wish Gabe Hardman was doing this instead of me.
All right, question number 1. 2 young Chicago hoodlums rise up from their poverty-stricken slum life to become petty thieves, bootleggers, and cold-blooded killers. But with notoriety and newfound wealth, the duo feel the heat from the cops and rival gangsters both. What's the name of this classic caper? Is it A, Two for the Money, B, The Public Enemy, or C, Brothers in Arms, or D, Chi-Town?
Well, that's James Cagney there, right? So
I'm going to say Cagney.
I'm just going to say Public Enemy.
The Public Enemy is correct. Very good. Mm-hmm. Peter, you got the first one right.
I got one right.
A sigh of relief.
Happy.
All right, that's Sean, awesome. You're next. And Peter, if he doesn't get this, you can come in for the steal.
Okay.
After World War I, friends Eddie, George, and Lloyd return to America with ambitions for the future. Eddie and George become partners in crime, but the stock market crash destroys their operation and turns old friends against each other, while Eddie falls in love with Lloyd's girlfriend, Jean. What's the name of this classic caper? Is it The Doughboys, B, Ruthless as Ever, C, The Roaring Twenties, or D, Blood Debt?
I absolutely have no idea, so I'm just going to go with A, The Doughboys.
That is incorrect. Peter, would you like to take a guess?
After World War One, I'm going to go Roaring Twenties.
The answer is The Roaring Twenties.
Nice.
Another James Cagney classic. All right.
There
So
you go.
Peter, you got a commanding lead, 2-0, and it's back to you. Okay. In one of New York's toughest neighborhoods, Hell's Kitchen, Rocky gets caught up in racketeering while his buddy Jerry decides to become a priest. When Rocky needs a temporary safe haven from his life of crime, Jerry hesitates, testing their friendship. What's the name of this classic caper? Is it A, Saints and Sinners, B, The Road Not Taken, C, Laying Low, or D, Angels with Dirty Faces?
Angels with Dirty Faces.
That is correct. Angels with Dirty Faces. If I'm not mistaken, this is the one that from Home Alone that they based off the fake gangster movie in Home Alone. This is what it's based off of. Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, so 3-0. It's going to take a monumental showing from you, Sean, but we're going to move on. Question number 4.
I can do it.
Aspiring small town criminals relocate to Chicago to hit the big time. While Rico makes a name for himself in the underworld, Joe decides to leave the life of crime and venture into show business. Can Joe and Rico remain friends as their choices take them down dramatically different paths? What's the name of this classic caper? Is it A, Little Caesar, B, Against All Odds, C, A Better Tomorrow, or D, A Seat at the Table?
And that poster looks very familiar too, so I'm kind of kicking myself. I'm leaning towards Against All Odds.
That is incorrect.
Okay.
Would you like to take a guess, Peter?
Little Caesar.
It is Little Caesar. Man, Peter, you're way better at this than you let on.
He was real nervous about this, and he's not even waiting to
he's completely dominating.
He's ringing. He's a ringer.
The visual cues are well worth it. Let's put it that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
That makes sense.
Peter is the Michael Jordan of gangster movie trivia now.
Right.
Okay. You know what? I'm going to give since Peter's kicking your rear end, I'm going to give Sean another shot at being first on this one.
It doesn't matter. I'm probably not going to get this one anyway.
Brick Davis is a New York City lawyer who is supported by a local mobster. When his buddy is killed by gangsters, Davis decides to take up the badge himself in order to bring the criminal to justice. What is the name of this classic caper? Is it A, The Payback, B, Vengeance Is My Name, C, G-Men, or D, Crossing the Line?
The Payback.
The Payback is incorrect.
See? My gosh.
Peter, would you like?
I never watched these movies growing up.
I've never seen a single one of them. I just found an article on the top gangster movies from the 1930s.
Right.
Okay.
I just had to get creative. What do you think, Peter?
This one is. I'm going to say Crossing the Line.
That is also incorrect. This is G-Men.
It is G-Men. Oh, I was thinking about that.
All right.
Interesting.
2 to go.
All
Peter,
these are like James Cagney movies too.
James Cagney and who else was on these? Edward G. Robinson.
Yeah.
Douglas Fairbanks. They were all big time gangster movie stars. Humphrey Bogart as well. He's going to be in a couple of these. He's in this one. So mobster babyface Martin returns home to visit the New York neighborhood where he grew up. He crosses paths with Dave, a childhood friend struggling to make it as an architect, and a gang of young boys roaming the streets of the city's east side slums. What's the name of this classic caper? Is it A, Dead End, B, No Place Like Home, C, Devil of the South Bronx, or D, Midnight in Manhattan?
Whose turn is it?
It's Peter.
So, Dead End.
It is Dead End. It is dead end. Man,
Peter totally is using that book to kind of shift through that he was telling us about.
All right, Sean, just for some respect.
No, not
last
even that.
one. Tony is an ambitious and reckless gangster on the rise in Chicago. When he takes out a rival gang, he draws the ire of his boss, Johnny, who orders him killed. When the hit backfires, Tony finds himself even closer to becoming king of the city. What's the name of this classic caper? Is it A, the Windy City, B, Logan Boulevard, C, No Good Deed, or D, Scarface?
For some reason, I'm leaning towards the Windy City for this one.
The Windy City is incorrect.
Oh my gosh. See, I told you, I had no idea. I feel like I saw the Windy City poster like this, but it must not have been it.
Boy, this one I would just be guessing.
If it helps, the name Tony is a big hint.
So this isn't the older Scarface, is it?
It is indeed the original Scarface.
Okay. There we go.
Yep. So that was a pretty good showing by you, Peter. You really know your gangster movies of the 1930s.
Oh, I was lucky.
Sometimes
that's why they made you the artist for We Only Kill Each Other.
Yeah, sometimes luck is better than being right. Being lucky beats being good a lot of times. That's the way I should put it.
I don't know if I've ever went completely zero on a game that we played before. So.
That was Sean's first shutout.
Yeah.
No show.
Being shut out. Yeah.
Don't feel bad about it. Don't feel bad.
The bad thing is that he'll have to come around and I do this to them every time we interview somebody. So eventually he's going to have to like dust himself off and get back in there and play another round with somebody
at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. And I'm so glad that you had the posters there because those were a big help.
Yeah.
Yeah. The games on this show is kind of like my creative outlet. For a listener, there were 7 questions. So there were 21 wrong answers that I had to come up with. And I got you guys on a couple of them.
Yeah, you did a good job. I like those.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a lot of fun for me to put it together. And it's Sean, when we started playing games with each other, playing games with our guests, won like 5 or 6 in a row. And it's kind of good to see him humbled now.
Well, it was really weird because half the time I was just guessing. So I'm like, I had no idea, I was even right on that. So I feel bad because we had somebody on the show where I literally had like every question right, and most of them I was guessing, and I felt so bad for her. So
that was as equally as brutal as watching you like nosedive today.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was brutal.
It's hard. It's hard when it's one-sided. So
yeah.
Well, Peter, thank you for being a good sport on that. And thank you for coming on the show. Before we let you go, can you let everybody online, let our listeners know where they can find you and your work online?
Well, the best place you can find me is on Twitter. I'm on there pretty much all the time while I'm working. My handle on Twitter, at least until Elon Musk takes over, is Peter G. Krause. And I do have a website, Peter Krause Illustration, that's fairly old and probably more for my advertising clients, but that's there on the web as well. So no Facebook, no Instagram. That's it.
Well, we will make sure to put that link in with the episode, and that way, we follow you on Twitter. So hopefully you can, when this comes out, you get some other people interested and go and follow you as well. That wraps up another episode of The Caption Life. We hope you enjoyed listening. Don't forget to smash the subscribe button on whatever major podcast platform you listen to us on. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Caption Life. If you like what we're doing, give us a shout out, tag us in your posts. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, please visit thecaptionlife.com. Until next time, stay safe.
Peace out.